Here's my tier list for all the characters once Honkai Star Rail is released. This won't have characters like Kafka or Serval because they are not being released upon launch. Jing Yuan. He is the best AoE damage dealer in the game. His passive is what makes him really good. The passive summons a lightning lord that does a certain amount of attacks each time the lightning lord attacks. Its base speed is pretty slow. Its attacks count as follow-up attacks. Every attack by the lightning lord will do a percentage of Jing Yuan's attack stat to a single enemy, plus splash damage on adjacent ones. Jing Yuan's skills and ults allow for the lightning lord to deal additional attacks. Each additional attack count will give 10 speed to lightning lord, and the max amount of attacks is at 10. At launch, he's insane. Not only this, his banner is actually crazy. It has Jing Yuan, who is the best AoE, Tingyun, who is the best support, March 7, who is a good defense buffer, and also Sushang, who is a phenomenal breaker. Therefore, Jing Yuan automatically goes to the SS tier. Pela is a great debuffer. Her skill can remove an enemy's buff, and her ultimate reduces defense of any enemy that's given the exposed debuff. What makes her good is that her passive generates energy based on how many enemies she debuff. In turn, she'll be able to use her debuff skills much faster, which means she can cycle the debuffs on enemies. She would be good with someone like Heng, since his slow would let Pela's debuff last much longer. Therefore, I think she'll be rated as the A tier. Bronya is a definitely sought after character, especially if someone like Seele or Jing Yuan. I don't see her being obsolete anytime soon, just because of what she offers to the entire team. Just her skill alone is really good. It can remove a debuff on an ally, let them get another turn as he just makes them faster, and also gives them good damage buff. Her ultimate gives allies additional attack and crit damage. Plus, her traces give allies additional defense and attack damage as well. Her basic attack even has a 100% chance of crit. There's just so much she can do and also give to the team, so I really don't think she'll be replaced anytime soon. Therefore, she's in SS along with Jing Yuan. Clara is actually pretty unique. She wants to be attacked by enemies. With her passive, she'll get 15% damage reduction, and also will be able to counter the enemy who is attacking it. With this passive, she can deal really good damage if a lot of enemies go for her. Her ultimate helps her with this as she will get more damage reduction as well as a taunt to all the enemies. It also enhances the counter as it'll deal more damage and also have adjacent enemies be receiving that splash damage from counter. Clara will definitely need a healer and support to help her deal much more damage and also have her survive much longer. I can see her being paired well with someone like March 7th. I can definitely see someone building her as a team comp and her dishing out a lot of damage. However, for general content, I don't think Clara would be like a must-have. Therefore, I believe Clara would be in the B tier. Welt is a really cool character in terms of game and also lore. Check my previous video where I briefly mentioned about the lore in the game. But regardless, let's talk about Welt. At launch, he'll be the only imaginary character in the game. Welt is a debuffer who also does decent damage. He has a lot of ways to debuff enemies in terms of slowing them down. His skill hits an enemy 3 times, each having a 75% chance to reduce the speed of the enemy. His ult will have a 100% chance to imprison an enemy, which delays their action by 40% and also reducing their speed by 10. His passive lets him deal additional damage to slowed enemies, which would definitely be common when you use him. Therefore, at the state of game, I would say he's around A to S tier, itching on A side but top of A. Gepard is overall a great tank. He has the highest HP and defense in the game. His passive makes enemies more likely to target him. His skill has a chance to freeze enemies. His ultimate applies a big shield to all allies. What makes him really good is his passive, which lets him revive if he would have gotten killed by an enemy attack. At launch, he'll be amazing. Maybe down the line he'll be power corrupt, but for now he is a solid unit to get. Therefore, I believe he will be in the S tier. Sampo is a decent debuffer and skill point generator. Sampo is able to attack a random enemy up to 4 times, and with his passive, each attack have a 65% chance to deal wind damage over time, and as well as wind shear. His traces prolong the duration of the wind shear, as well as give a slight attack debuff to enemies. His ultimate is pretty good, as it increases the amount of damage an enemy will take from damage over time effects. He's decent, but I think it will be better if you compare him with someone that deals damage over time effect as well. Therefore, I believe Sampo should be with B tier along with Clara. Asta is a great sub DPS, especially for enemies weak to fire. Her whole kit is about dealing as many fire attacks as possible. This is that she can gain stacks in her passive and also buff allies' attack and speed. This is paired well with her other ability that gives her basic attack an 80% chance to burn and damage over time. Overall, she's a great general use sub DPS. The only disadvantage would be that if she were to go against an enemy that are strong against fire, then most of her kit won't be that useful since she primarily buffs fire element. Therefore, I would place her in the A slot. Himeko is decent. She definitely is not as bad as what everyone says about her. She just has a bad reputation because of her damage. Her skill doesn't deal that big of single target damage. It also does splash damage, but still good. Whenever an enemy is broken, she gains a stack. Once the stack reaches 3, then she will deal AoE damage after an ally performs an attack. Her ult also deals AoE damage. The reason why she's not that good is just because of the multipliers that Himeko have on her abilities. If it were to be buffed, then she'll definitely be a lot better. But at launch, I believe she'll be in the B to C tier, but I'll just go lower B. Arlan's an excellent DPS from what we've seen so far. His skill does not use skill points, so you'll be able to use it a lot more frequently. A drawback is that the skill uses 15% of his HP, but if you have a support or healer in the game, then he'll be able to deal phenomenal damage. His passives help in that if he is under a specific health threshold, his attack damage will be increased. Not only this, if he enters combat with 50% HP or less, then he'll be invulnerable to one attack, plus the damage buff he's already getting. He'll definitely pair well with characters like Bronya, who also increase damage with team, or someone like Tingyun, who also gives damage buff. You can have him paired with a healer like Bailu just in case he's getting too low, so I think he belongs in the S tier. Herta. I want to say that there's a use case for every character, but it's a little tough for her. She's not really a good damage dealer. Her skills don't have good multipliers, and that sucks since she's an AoE damage dealer. Passive will deal AoE damage to enemies once an enemy is below 50% HP. However, the multiplier for that damage is abysmal. Her other ability is not that useful, as it will only give extra attack for 3 turns. There's really not much use case for her at the moment, unless it makes something that will allow her to benefit from dealing a lot of AoE. I'd rather just focus on other AoE damage dealers that just give much more to the table. Therefore, she goes into the E slot. Heng is a good damage dealer. His kit is about dealing wind damage and being empowered by buffs from allies and debuffs from enemies. If he crits, his skill will have a 100% chance to reduce the target speed. If an enemy has a slow debuff, then his ultimate will deal extra percentage damage. If he's buffed by an enemy, then he will have wind resistance penetration, which will be good against enemies resistant to wind. As a DPS, he's solid. He's just a little conditional, as he has to be able to slow an enemy from do additional damage. Therefore, I believe that he should be around B tier, a little higher than Himeko. Trailblazer physical. They're okay. This element of Trailblazer gets a bad rep, as their counterpart is just much better. Physical Trailblazer will still be usable, but they will just not be used as much as their kit isn't that good. However, one cool thing is that you can have the ultimate either deal good single target damage or good AoE damage. I just think that they're not going to be used much once you get other good characters, as this version of Trailblazer is just trying too much. We already got a really good physical breaker in the form of Sushang, a phenomenal support like Tingyun, and better damage dealers out there. This version of Trailblazer just gets overshadowed by other characters, so use won't be that much outside of early game. Therefore, he gets in the C slot. Serval is a decent damage dealer. Her kit is pretty solid, just that it's nothing crazy in terms of DPS. Her skill deals AoE damage to enemies and has an 80% chance to shock them for additional damage. Her ultimate extends the duration of the shock effect. Her passive helps as she deals increased damage to shocked enemies. She's a decent AoE damage dealer, but won't be that much used unless you're farming. She's decent as an early game DPS if you don't got any of the other 5 stars. Therefore, she goes into C slot. Yanqing. He's a great damage dealer. Unlike some other ones, you don't really need as much support to get him to deal some good damage. His skill deals a decent amount of damage, but also activates Empathic Sword Link. This is what lets him deal a lot of damage. His ult increases his crit rate by 60%, but when in Empathic Sword Link, it also increases his crit damage before dealing 350% damage to a single enemy. His traces also benefit him as he deals additional damage to enemies weak to ice, and also increased speed whenever a crit hit, which should be fairly often. Finally, his passive is what makes everything work together really well. When he's in Empathic Sword Link, less likely to be attacked by enemies. He gains additional crit damage and crit rate. After he attacks, he has a 60% chance to do a follow-up, plus a 65% chance to freeze an enemy. Overall, he's a really good DPS, therefore he goes into the A tier. Bailu. She's literally one of the only 2 healers in the game. She'll be useful especially for light content such as Forgotten Hall. She's pretty much mandatory for team compositions. Her kit is all about healing allies. Her skill heals an ally 3 times, each being a sizable percentage. Her ultimate heals all allies for a bigger percentage compared to her skill. Her passive just lets her heal more whenever an ally is knocked down or invigorated. So yeah, she's just really good. At launch, she was definitely an S tier. However, will she be in the same tier in a year from now? I honestly doubt it. The only reason why she's raised so high is because she's one of the only 2 healers in the game. If there were to be more healers introduced, then she might fall off. Plus, she's only a healer. She doesn't really give any other buff unless you reach her late Eidolons. Fire Trailblazer. They're really good at doing basic attack. Primarily, we'll be doing basic attack to generate skill points and stacks. If you get 4 more stacks, the basic attack will be enhanced. Their skill will reduce damage that a Trailblazer would take by 50%, get a stack, and also taunt enemy. What makes the Trailblazer even better is a passive, which gives shield to allies every time the Trailblazer uses any attack, such as skill, basic, ultimate, etc. Granted, the shield isn't that much, but still decent. Overall, the fire element is a really good unit. Therefore, they're an 8 slot. Sushang is a fantastic breaker. Her skill can do a lot of damage to his toughest bar, and also lets her use her skills much more often. Pretty reliant on using a lot of skills. What makes her notable is that when you get her Eidolon 1, if she breaks an enemy, she regains a skill point. That's really good as she can use another skill right away. Her kit is just overall really good, therefore a slot as well. Qingque. She could be decent, but her kit relies so much on RNG that most of the time she wouldn't be that good if you were to use her. Her kit relies on her getting 4 of the same tile, but it isn't that often that you'll get that. Her skill lets you draw 2 tiles and an extra turn, so you would have to continuously use it in order to get those 4 tiles. If not, then you're pretty much just using her basic until you get her ult. Her ult changes all tiles to the same one, that's good, but it just takes too long. On top of that, the 4 tile buff gives additional damage to the basic attack, but once you use it, you'll have to get another 4 tiles. So right now, she's not that good. Therefore, she's a D tier. Tingyun. She's basically a must-have unit and must-use character. She's a phenomenal support and works in a lot of team compositions. Her skill just increases damage of an ally by a lot. Her ultimate also increases an ally damage, but it also gives them 50 energy. There's not much to say about her because she's just amazing. If you get her Eidolons, then the ally that receives Tingyun's buffs will also get additional effect. I don't see her being obsolete anytime soon, so it's well worth getting sell over her, especially since she's just a 4-star. Therefore, she goes into the SS slot. Natasha is a phenomenal unit for the game currently. Her being a 4-star unit means she's easily accessible as you unlock her through the story. Currently one of the only 2 characters that can heal in the game, so her usefulness will be insane. She would fall off eventually once more healers are introduced, but that's the case for all units. Her skill will heal an ally, as well as give them regenerative healing for 2 turns. Her ultimate does an AoE heal to all allies and requires a little amount of energy. Her passive lets her deal more healing if an ally is really low. Overall, she's basically a must-have and must-use unit for late game content. Therefore, she's an S tier. Seele. She's literally the best single target damage dealer in the game. She also has the high speed stat. Her skill does a solid amount of damage, plus makes her even faster for 2 turns. When she kills an enemy, she goes into a buff state, where she'll be given an extra turn, as well as a big damage buff that she can use to deal even more damage. Her trace also gives her quantum penetration when she's in a buff state. Another big trace is that after a basic attack, her next action will forward 20%. She is essentially a better version of Heng. Her ultimate deals an insane 400% damage to an enemy. I don't really have much to say about her, just that I'll be summoning for her, so therefore she'll be in the SS slot. Finally, we got March 7th. Her defensive abilities are pretty good. The shield will be really good early game, especially with someone like Heng, as he can get his wind resistance penetration to be activated. If she has Trace, then her shield ability will also cleanse the unit. On top of that, her freeze ability at the beginning of the game is pretty decent at setting up your team. She is a solid support for general content, therefore she's in B tier.
Post edit. I realize that Hook is not on the tier list, so I'll do it right now. Hook is a good fire damage dealer. Her skill has a 100% chance to burn and deals a decent amount of damage. Her ultimate allows her skill to deal damage to adjacent enemies as well. With her passives and traces, she can regenerate energy and max HP every time she attacks a burnt enemy, which should not be hard with her kit. She's definitely a good damage dealer, however, there's already other characters that also deal good damage as a fire element, such as Asta. If a mono fire team was to be made, then she'll be really good with someone like Asta, but as for regular, she'll get a little overshadowed. This would especially be the case if an enemy were to come out with burn resistance, as her whole kit relies on burn. So for that reason, I believe she's in the B slot.
Well, that's it. That's my tier list for all the characters that are coming out during launch. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see some more content regarding Honkai Star Rail and possibly other games down the line. See ya!